Greetings all, my name is JD from Studio 2105. Welcome back to MixStream Online and a brand new episode of Weekly Update Wednesdays. This week's video is going to be covering the question of recording guitars with effects and avoiding production hell. First of all, I want to say hi to all the new viewers and a big shout out and a thank you to all the patrons who help to support the channel financially. If you're new here, please do head on down, click on the subscribe button and also on the bell so that you'll be notified every time I put out a brand new video. Do sign up for the email list, you get a bunch of free stuff and free goodies. And if you want to become a supporter of the channel to help the creation of content such as this, do go on and sign up to become a patron at www.patreon.com/studio2105. I hope everyone is doing fine. We are kind of getting into the second week of being back in business. As you may know, here in Malaysia, the entire creative industry was allowed to open back again. So hopefully things are going okay. Obviously, it's a little bit too early to tell. It's only been a week. But I hope every one of you, those of you who may be musicians or engineers or producers who have, kind of been out of work for a very, very long time, hopefully things are looking brighter for you lah. As for me, well, I have lots of things that have been going on, right? Obviously, when things have opened up, I got a lot of calls, a lot of inquiries about the studio, about projects that have been on hold for a long time, for a couple of months already since earlier this year. Hopefully things are gonna get back on track lah. I'm also right in the middle of, moving a house today, and today was a huge day. Today I did most of the major moving, so I'm really exhausted and really beat. Well, not the spring chicken that I used to be in the earlier days, I have to admit it. Okay, but anyway, I'm still here to do this video for you. So this week's question goes a little something like this. Why would anyone want to bake the guitar effects into a recording while tracking, as opposed to having the flexibility to tweak it later? Can anyone give me a reason on what I might be missing? This is a great question, and it's one that I've come across many times. Now, there are several schools of thought when it comes to recording. There's the record everything clean and dry and process it later, with plugins in the mix. Then there's the old school way of record the sounds exactly the way you want it to sound like in the mix, And this sort of thinking extends to not only guitar effects, but also things such as the specific type of amp, the type of cabinet, type of pedals, effect pedals that may be used, and the list goes on. Now, but there's also the middle ground. You see, it's a whole spectrum, There's a middle ground as well. On one hand, striving to capture the best possible tone, but also having, on the other hand, having the flexibility of using a DI track. And later on, using VST amp simulators, reamping, amp modelers, and such. You'll probably be guessing as to which direction I'm leaning towards, but the purpose of my channel is not to tell you or to tell anyone what is right or what is wrong, but to share with you what I think works for me and why I think that a certain way may be better than another, And we discuss that on this channel. Now, ultimately, the goal of learning is to always to look at a subject from all angles, You examine the facts, you weigh the pros and the cons, then you arrive, at the decision that not only works for you as an individual, but also very importantly for the people who you might be working with, or sometimes the people that you might be working for, your clients who might be paying you. One thing I think we mustn't forget, and it's unfortunately the pandemic and the isolation, right, that comes along has exacerbated this thing, is that music, right, is seldom created in a vacuum. Well, I personally think that the bigger picture here is that we sometimes, what we choose to do, what methods or workflows that we decide to adopt, we have to decide sometimes what is better for everyone as a collective whole, and in the context of this, a production team or a band or a client, instead of looking at things purely from an individual perspective. But again, I'm not here to turn this into a philosophical discussion, okay? So let's go back to the question. Here's why I think that recording with effects is the way to go. Number one, faster workflow. If you can capture the guitar tones in the way that it should sound like in the final mix, there will be less work needed during the mixing process. Maybe some minor tweaks here and there, but nothing much. Now, if you watch some of my previous episodes of MixStream, you'll notice that sometimes when it comes to some of the guitar parts, I often find that there's nothing much that needs to be done because it already sounds good. Just maybe needs to be level, needs to be balanced, and you just need to add a tiny touch of tweaks to it. Now, as a mixer, I'm perfectly happy to have my hands tied down, okay? But tied down by good audio engineering. Having this also helps me avoid unnecessarily fixing things, okay? Or having to sort through endless tracks of DI, or microphone tracks. Working fast saves time, and which in turn saves money. Now, if you turn around work quickly, and of course with quality, don't compromise on that, it keeps your clients and their wallets happy. Number two, avoids production limbo. Production hell happens when a project is presented with an overwhelming number of options, right, and choices. Now, when decisions regarding anything, it can be guitar tones, it can be any sort of element or arrangement decision, is deferred until later, what happens is it just adds another layer. It adds layers and upon layers of complexity to the entire decision-making process. Now, if you can't decide what your main rhythm guitar should sound like, how would you possibly know what the appropriate sound is going to be for, let's say, another part, another additional part, a supporting part that could be an octave line, a pattern, a plucking pattern, a delay line, for example. Goes back, if you decide to change the sound of one part, you will very possibly likely discover that you have to change another to make it fit. Everything affects everything. This thing extends to all other things as well in the production. For example, drum sound, the bass tone, bass especially is very important because you need to decide how much of the low end should it contribute to the mix. Things like keyboard parts, and even down, right, to a certain extent, the vocal and the vocal arrangements, okay? Remember, everything affects everything in a mix. Number three, performance is related to tone. Now, a guitarist's performance, right, is inextricably linked to what they hear when they're playing. So it's a massive, it's a crushing distortion, right, that they're getting, okay? It will inspire them to play with a certain amount of energy and aggression, right, which is appropriate for the part. If it's a delay pedal that's being used, right, it will cause him or her to play rhythmically to the sound of that effect, you see. When you have reverb, when you have ambience, right, it will inspire an entirely different sort of emotion, and that comes through in the playing as well. And most obviously, when you are working with tube amps, okay, tube amps are of course extremely sensitive to the dynamics of the player. So if there is something that elicits a better performance from the musician, there should be no reason not to utilize that something, right? Get what I mean? Number four, improves your recording skills. Finding tones and committing to them, right, is it's a very, very good exercise in improving one's audio engineering skills. Now, put in the time, put in the effort to learn about guitars, pickup types, string gauges, the type of pick and the material that's being used, knowing what type of amp to choose, how to work the controls, what type of speaker cabinet to use along with that amp, what microphone, knowing where to place them. All this is obviously, right, needless to say, a valuable skill to have. Although some of these aspects can be simulated right in a plugin or an app modeler, I would argue that the actual physical act of doing things, turning the knob and actually right moving things and moving microphones around is actually something that's better absorbed by the brain. When you have a combination of learning, right, from the instruction of others and also from making mistakes of actually doing the things, discovering by trial and error, right? You get great sounds on one day and then, oh, you try another thing and then it doesn't sound so great. These sort of things, right, really enhances your learning skills and really accelerates the ability of your mind, of your brain to acquire and to really master these skills. This in turn circles back to my earlier point about workflow. Once you know better what tools to reach for in order to capture the sound you want, it improves the speed, it improves the efficiency of the entire process. Tracking with effects, EQ, and compression, okay, is a skill that isn't easy to acquire, but once you do it, once again, it's going to make you a cut above everyone else. Last on the list, number 5, it is a professional mindset. If you know how to make it sound good, it means that you know what you're doing and why, very importantly, why you don't need to tweak it later, because it already sounds good. As I mentioned earlier, it removes the temptation to mess with things and try to fix what ain't broken. Now, I would also want to point out, okay, a very important consideration, which it's something that I actually read in an article somewhere discussing this very question. Now, it is of course totally unnecessary to bake the effects when recording, and sometimes it is something that you probably shouldn't be doing, okay, unless the circumstances surrounding your environment, okay, are right. What do I mean by this? If your monitoring isn't great, okay, or if the room that you're recording in is less than ideal, it's probably something that you want to avoid, because you can end up causing problems, right, which will be a nightmare to deal with later down the line. Now, hopefully, this is where the DI track that you recorded will come in handy, okay, to save the day. To round it all off, right, doing something right for the sake of just being old school, for the sake of being cool, right, to having a great studio story that you can tell, shouldn't be the only reason why you do a certain thing. Remember, professionals always takes into account all the factors that surround a particular problem and knows how to act accordingly. So that's my take on this topic, okay, right? I've gotten this question many times from folks who record at home, and then when you want to send tracks over, hey JD, you know, should I record this with effects or without? Think about all these considerations, okay, and all these points. Once again, it's not necessary to do it, but if you can, it would be a good thing and it's a positive thing, okay? It's better, improves your skills, improves workflow, right? And a lot of good things, good factors as well that can come out of it. So, what do you think, right? Let me know in the comments below. Maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you have a different take on this question. I would love to hear from you. So if you found this video useful and informative, please do leave a like, do share, and if you haven't become a subscriber, please do subscribe down there. Really helps with the YouTube algorithm as well, okay? Once again, if you want to become a patron, head on down to www.patreon.com/stu2105. Your support is going to be very much appreciated. Till next time, stay safe, stay happy and healthy, happy recording and mixing, peace, love, and music.